we are really lucky to have with us Dr. Toddi Steelman. She is the current president of the International Association of Wildland Fire and the dean of the Nicholas School of Environment at Duke University. And she's going to talk with us a little bit about a very timely topic of diversity in our fire world.
Very good. Thanks, Laurel. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep, you're all good.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laurel, for your kind introduction. Thank you also for the very kind invitation to talk to you all today about these topics that are very near and dear to my heart. We usually get to talk about pyrodiversity, but today we get to talk about people diversity. And so I'm excited about that. I also want to say thanks to Amanda for all of her support here along the way, and to Thomas Crate as well, just for the help in getting us to this point. I know it takes a lot to organize these meetings, and under these conditions, even more so. So thank you all. Let's see. All right. So I think you all have been probably aware that there has been growing awareness about sort of issues related to diversity of one kind or another. It initially started with the Me Too movement that brought a lot of attention to our workplace culture, gender discrimination, and harassment. As the president of the IAWF, I spent 2 years being vice president, and during that time I had written a sort of an op-ed basically about the Me Too movement and what it means for us as a wildfire and prescribed fire community. And so I think with that, and then of course in the last couple of months, what's really come to the fore in our society is this notion of racial justice. How do we actually move towards a more anti-racist stance in a lot of the things that we do, and give the attention to the Black Lives Matter movement that it so well deserves, given the, I think, with the deaths of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, the systemic racism, the sense of white privilege really comes to the fore. And I think is a good wake-up call for us to reflect a little bit on where we are, what part we play in that process, and how we all might do a better job in addressing some of these sort of systemic discrimination, whether it's gender or racial, that can be deeply embedded in the institutional cultures that we all inhabit. And in many cases, people may actually be unaware that they're participating in discriminatory practices. And so I think one of the nice things about right now, this moment in time, is that it has created some space for us to have some more frank conversations than we've been able to have in our culture and our society for quite some time. And I think that's really constructive for us. Today, I'm going to focus mostly on gender discrimination. It's not to say that racial discrimination is not important, but that's where I spent most of my time thinking about until the last couple of months, and I've got more work to do in that area. So I want to take you back to 2015, when the Association of Fire Ecology did a survey among some of its membership and beyond to try to understand the extent of sexual harassment and gender discrimination among its association. And what they found is that 32% of the people surveyed reported observing incidents of sexual harassment, and 24% experienced that directly. 50% reported observing gender discrimination, and 44% reported experiencing it directly. So those are pretty high percentages, but I think what is actually really shocking are the next two statistics. 64% of respondents who experienced sexual harassment and 60% who experienced gender discrimination didn't even report it. And people don't report when they do not trust the systems in which they work. And I find this to be a bit of a tragedy in terms of people are out there sort of dealing with harassment and discrimination and don't feel like they have any place where they can go to sort of get some help and report on it. And that's something we really do need to change. So what is sexual harassment and what is gender discrimination? I think it's helpful to define terms, because one of the questions that I often get, I wear two hats. I'm the president of IAWF, and I'm also the dean of a school. And somebody will often come up to me and is like, I don't know if I've actually experienced sexual harassment. I think I have, but I'm not quite sure. So sexual harassment is harassment that occurs in a workplace or a social situation that affects your ability to perform your job. And it can take a variety of different forms, but basically it is something that prohibits you from doing your job. Gender discrimination is when someone is treated unfairly because of their gender, and that manifests itself as unequal pay or inequitable opportunity for promotion, benefits, or other rewards. And so those are just two definitions that I think are helpful for people to know. And like I said, I think what we're facing now is growing awareness of these issues for us. And often what comes up when I'm talking to people or implicit in the conversation, and there has been some peer-reviewed literature on this as well, is that people see a real trade-off between increased gender diversity and excellence. In other words, if we increase our gender diversity, and by extension, although there is not research out on the racial side of this, I will extend the argument to that we are compromising our excellence as a fire organization in some way. And so what I feel like we really need to do is to push back against these misleading narratives that really pit excellence against diversity, and especially gender diversity in our professions. Because, I truly believe that we will not really be excellent in our organizations until we are diverse, because it's diversity that truly does make us more robust and resilient. And there's a lot of literature out there that basically suggests that the more diverse you are, the more innovative, the more creative you are at problem solving and finding alternatives to those problems. And so, and the rationale behind that is when we see problems from different perspectives, when we see them from different viewpoints, we come to appreciate their complexities in ways that we might not have before. So we can be more creative problem solvers when we have multiple perspectives. We can be better fire lighters, we can be better firefighters, we can be better practitioners, better managers, and better scientists when we are more diverse. And so I just feel like those are sort of fairly pragmatic arguments. I mean, not only should we do it because it's the right thing to do, the morally ethical right thing for us to be doing, but there are also pragmatic arguments in terms of how it will make our fire organizations and everything that we do better. So in the International Association of Wildland Fire, we have tried to advance sort of examples of best practices. In other words, what we've created are a diversity and inclusion policy, principles of conduct, a new reporting technique called SPOT that I'm going to describe to you, and then some future trainings. And the whole idea here is for us to set an example and provide materials that we hope you will steal from us and modify for your own purposes. So if there is anything in here that is useful to you, we hope that you will steal it, take it, and make it your own. So our diversity and inclusivity policy, the whole idea behind our diversity and inclusivity policy is to create a more healthy working environment. And the principle behind that is that if we have more healthy workplace environments, many of the attributes that we would want from our communities would follow. In other words, if we have a healthy workplace environment, it will be free of harassment. It will be free of misconduct. It will be free of toxic power relationships. And it will be free of racism and discrimination in all of its forms. So what we're asking is, how do we maintain positive, empowering, inclusive, innovative cultures, not only within IAF, but within, the IAWF membership is made up of representatives from all sorts of fire organizations all over the United States, all over the world. And we're trying just to basically say, look, this is what we could all be doing in our own organizations. And I've got a link right up there to the policy that's on our webpage, and I have provided to Laurel a copy of this presentation that she can send out to anybody who wants to get links to all of these materials. So again, back to some definitions. What do we mean by diversity and what do we mean by inclusion, since that's what our policy is based on? Diversity basically just takes in all the differences among people in how they identify, whether that's age or caring responsibilities. Are you a mother? Are you looking after your parents? Do you have somebody in your home that is health compromised in a way? All of those things apply. Cultural background, including Indigenous peoples, disability, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic standing, as well as the whole variety of professional backgrounds. So diversity is a very, very broad term in the way we define it in IAWF, so that we can be highly inclusive. So inclusion is the second part of the diversity and inclusion piece. That's when a diverse group of people basically feels equally valued and respected and has a sense of belonging, knows they can contribute. You have created an environment where they feel like they can speak out, say their piece. And I think one of the inherent tensions between diversity and inclusion is that as we become more diverse and aim for a more inclusive environment, which basically means we want people to be speaking up, we actually invite more conflict, because that basically says we want people to tell us what's wrong. And if you've created a healthy work environment, you're going to actually hear from more people about what the challenges are that they're facing. So that's one of the, paradoxes of us working through the challenges of becoming more diverse, being open to a more inclusive environment, and then opening ourselves up to getting more comfortable with uncomfortable conversations that flow from that. But that's just all part of the process, so we shouldn't shy away from it. The other part of what we have been doing is creating principles of conduct. In other words, articulating what our core values are, making sure people understand what the expected behavior is for our membership, and whenever we sponsor a conference, what the expected behavior is at a conference, clarifying what our unacceptable behavior is, and then also asking and calling upon our membership to say, if you witness something, you need to speak out about it, or especially if you're subjected to it, know that you have a comfortable place to come in terms of reporting that kind of unacceptable behavior, so we can take corrective action towards it. And then at the end of the day, of course, if you're going to go through this, you have to have enforcement of principles of conduct in order to hold people accountable, and that's something that we've also done. And so again, the principles of conduct, the PDF are right there in terms of whatever you would like to see. If you would like to check it out. So we also have a reporting tool, Spot. Spot is a bot, a robot. It's basically an anonymous way for people to document harassment and discrimination, either by yourself or by something that you may have witnessed. It does not commit you to anything other than recording the incident and what happened as soon as you can after the event, while all the details are fresh in your mind. Because if you capture it soon after, they can be traumatizing. It's an opportunity basically just to have a record of what happened. And with Spot, basically no one will read your report unless you tell us to do so. So there's a way to basically channel your report. You can fill out a report. The bot has prompts that basically walk you through the process of how to make a report. That report is emailed to you, so you have a record. And if you want to send it on to IAWF, we then keep it for you, and we can take action or not. We take your advice on what you would like to see. It doesn't commit anybody to action unless you want action. And then finally, this is sort of my last slide for us today, is that we have a new subcommittee on workforce resilience that's trying to understand, how do we create a more resilient workforce? Anybody who's out there working a career in prescribed fire or wildland fire, or any of these supporting sort of roles that you may play, tend to encounter some challenges. And so what we're creating are a series of what we're calling Ignite Talks that are participatory, like 20-minute talk, 20-minute breakout participatory session, and then a 20-minute wrap-up around key areas that we are hearing from our membership that they would like to have an opportunity to participate in. So again, this is part of the inclusion piece of the diversity and inclusion, in terms of how do we create space for some conversations around wildland fire, motherhood, fatherhood, family, and dual careers, mental health and well-being, our cultural fire environments, and recruitment and outreach. So it just gives you a sense of the flavor of some of the things we're trying to do to support our community through some of these challenging topics as we create a more inclusive environment. So I'm going to quit there. And if you're interested in any of the work that we're doing on inclusion and diversity, or on the workforce resiliency pieces, I invite you to join us at IAWF. We'll just leave it at that. Maybe I have a minute for questions there, Laurel.
Yeah, I know those are big topics, but if folks have some relatively quick questions, you can put them in the chat. I'll also say, and this is just my personal take and certainly not speaking for anyone else, I think there's a lot of work that we can all do together on this within our state. And I would be interested in hearing from folks who are interested in working with the PFC or other entities to do that. I'll put my email in the chat box if anyone is interested in following up and talking more about that. And Bob Mickler says, just real quick, we should also be talking about how we as the fire ecology community can support historically Black and economically disadvantaged family farms.
And I would say to Bob, I think that's a terrific insight, and really great place for us to do a lot of work. Like I said, in the last couple of months, these issues have come onto the fore. That's not an excuse. We should have been looking at these all along. And I think there's some really great work we can be doing in that area. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Toddi.